What are you seeing out there in terms of both your own ability to source what you need in terms of chips and/or customers as well?
Yeah, chips and other supplies as well. There are critical supplies that are really stuck in bottlenecks all around the world. During the pandemic, our supply chain folks stepped up and became the heroes of the organization. They've been using some risk management techniques, really diversifying our sources of supply, and now using some data analytics that are giving us the chance to predict and be prepared for the future. But actually, the big thing we're seeing, David, is an emphasis throughout the supply chain on going global, making sure that, yes, we're taking advantage of global innovation, but finding more regional sources of supply.
Yeah, you've talked a good amount about local, but is this a real thing, Barbara? I mean, are we actually seeing it? Because you also twin it with this idea of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., which, of course, many people would applaud, although it's not clear to me that the people are there necessarily to actually fill the jobs. But is this a real thing that you're talking about? Is this actually happening?
It's very real. And Siemens, as you know, we're a global enterprise, and we have customers who have locations around the world. In the past, people talked about reshoring, like would we move operations from elsewhere in the world into the U.S.? That's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is an and. We're seeing people say, hey, I want to be able to produce closer to demand. And that is actually beginning to take hold. I think the pandemic highlighted for people when we could not get critical supplies here in the U.S. and we were dependent on other regions of the world where perhaps they were shut down by the disease, we knew it was important for us to be able to have supplies here.
But we went through a 20-plus, 30-year period where it was all about sourcing from the most efficient, least lowest cost place.
Yeah, that's right. So this last couple of decades have been about mass production. The idea of get things as cheap as you can, right? Supply side economies of scale. There's a shift going on now to demand side economies of scale. Actually, what if we had mass customization instead? That's what the future of manufacturing can be about.
Well, give me a sense then as to what you're talking about, if you can, a real-world example.
Yeah, a great example might be, what if I'm producing something which is rather rare, and I'd really, rather than go to previously a manufacturer who was mass producing these things, get in line, wait for them to be able to handle it. What if I could actually use additive manufacturing and have it printed on demand for my need? Or what if I want to customize the car, the shoes? We heard from Volkswagen yesterday that they are really beginning to see an uptick in people pre-ordering the vehicles they want. So they're not producing in the hope that there will be demand. They are producing on demand.
So is this tied in with this idea of a digital twin as well?
That's exactly right. The digital tools of today, this last decade, there have been so many advances in the digital tools. We've used them in entertainment and, our retail lives, et cetera. All of those tools now are coming into the Internet of really big things. The idea that when we work on infrastructure and industry, we are actually able to connect things like we never have before and share digital plans and tools. We can actually devise products before we ever have to bend metal by simulating and modeling.
Speaking of bending metal, the infrastructure bill would seem to be an important one for your company.
Certainly.
What is your sense in terms of the likelihood that it will get passed and/or there will be some significant allocation towards infrastructure rebuild here in the United States?
Yeah, David, I am an optimist. Everyone who works with me knows that, and
Where does that come from?
Confident.
What gives you that optimism?
It's a deeply seated belief that I think that it's these moments of intense disruption where there's a lot of passion, even on both sides of the aisle, where we get the greatest momentum. I'm confident we're going to get to an infrastructure bill, and here's why. If any of us were trying to run a business and couldn't agree with our colleagues about where to devote research dollars, we would soon be out of business. So the country knows we need to make investments, and it goes beyond the concrete and steel. This is a moment when we're going to be building out electric vehicle charging systems. It's a moment when we're going to be upgrading our railroads. So this is a moment where what we do, what we invest in infrastructure will yield returns for decades to come.